You're listening to How Can I Keep From Singing, a podcast where we explore the power of singing together. My name is Stuart Stotts, coming to you from rural Wisconsin, and my guests today are Nadine Cooper and Bernie Bracha. When Nadine Cooper was young, her music teacher asked her to stop singing as she was spoiling it for everyone else. She spent the next few decades avoiding public singing, but got frustrated when she heard how good singing in a group is for human beings. Nadine met local choir leader Bernie Bracha and was invited to join one of her community choirs. Nadine didn't think she'd enjoy it. She didn't want to try to learn to sing. She just wanted to sing. Nadine suggested a choir just for people like her, where people could sing without being judged. Bernie agreed to lead a session to see if anyone was interested. Their sole aim would be to have members walk out the door feeling uplifted. There'd be no auditions, no music, no parts, and no tuition. The first Tuneless Choir took place on Thursday the 14th, January 2016, in the West Bridgeford area of Nottingham. And now today, there are over 30 active tuneless choirs around the UK, with more in the planning stage. Nadine and Bernie, welcome to How Can I Keep From Singing?
Thank you.
Thank you for having us here. That was great.
So I get a little bit of the story. Nadine, maybe you could just begin by talking about your early years in singing and how that was frustrating to not be encouraged or allowed to sing. I think many people have experienced something like that. What was that like for you?
Yeah, they have indeed. I'm not alone in this. I hear many stories of teachers and vicars tapping people on the shoulders and saying, please mime, or like mine, please stop singing. There was a please. I think the sadness for me was that I'd really loved singing through primary school, as lots of kids do. And then I'd got to what we call secondary school. So and I'd gone through the first year and they hadn't said anything. But obviously, I got a music teacher who was setting up the school choir, I think, and he wanted to screen us all to see whether we were possible material. And it just came as a huge shock to me, because I thought I put lots of effort in, which in retrospect probably was because I was yelling and going for kind of quantity over quality. I just thought everybody else wasn't making the effort because they were so quiet. So yes, I was pretty mortified. Choir was set up. I didn't join it. My friends did. So there was a kind of loss of a friendship group on Wednesday lunchtimes when these rehearsals took place. And then there was so much in the school that I couldn't then take part in terms of all the school drama productions were always involved singing. I just thought, well, I need to self-exclude from that because I know I can't, that's something that's beyond my reach.
There's a sense of isolation and loneliness, and even some people use the word trauma about being told not to sing and so on. Sounds like something you experienced?
I think I was more mortified. Yes, I was just a bit, I didn't realise, and disappointed, sad. I've thought for many decades, I've come back to the thought of, that's something I should be allowed to do. There should be somewhere for people like me. If it's not the school choir, there should be somewhere else.
So Bernie, it sounds like you had a history of singing with people, community choirs and so on. Can you talk a little bit about your time before the Tuneless Choirs began?
I was a music teacher in a secondary school. And so I was doing music all the time, and singing was a huge part of that. So when I kind of took semi-retirement and decided it would be a good thing to set up a choir of my own in a local village, that's where it all started, really. And from there, a second choir was set up. And then it was a couple of years later that I met Nadine, and that's when the Tuneless Choir started. But yeah, my background is very much in music, although I have to tell you that my mum, God rest her soul, was completely tuneless and could not sing at all. She was very quiet if she sang. She was told as a child in Ireland by the nuns who were teaching her, I want you to sit at the front, but please don't sing out loud, just mime.
I think about the joy of so many children that you watch just singing when they're very young without any sense of how they sound or what others might perceive, and how that gets lost over time?
I think it's really sad. I think it's something that people are really missing out on. And I think the most cruel thing is that most people hear this when the children at a time when it really does affect them. I think when you're my age and somebody says you can't do that, I would just laugh and say, well, I might not be able to do it very well, but I'll give it a go anyway. But I think if you're a child or a teenager, that's so much harder.
It's an early wounding that's harder to recover from. And so many people, again, on this program I've talked with, have either dealt with that themselves or worked with folks who are coming back from that disinclination to sing. Before we talk about the Tuneless Choirs, Bernie, one more question. I've spoken with a lot of people on this podcast about the power of community choirs, people who come together to sing in a whole range of genres and styles and abilities. I'm assuming that's sort of what your community choirs were like.
Yeah, it's a real mixture. We sing a cappella, we sing accompanied. I don't have a pianist, so I tend to use backing tracks. So that's a similarity to the Tuneless Choir. I think the big thing about this is what I learned when I started the community choir, is that the community is actually more important than the choir. People have made such amazing friendships as being part of a choir. And of course, the Tuneless Choir is no different at all. We have such a fantastic group of people who are just there to have fun and to sing their hearts out and not worry about what it sounds like.
So then we come to this auspicious meeting between the two of you that led to the development of the Tuneless Choirs. Can you just talk about that encounter and kind of the process that got you to start this other iteration of singing together?
I'd heard of Bernie before I met her, in that one of my friends was in one of her community choirs. I'd been writing an article about how great choirs were, how all my friends seemed to be joining them, but a conclusion I never could. And Bernie had been kind enough to send me some photos. So when we kind of first met, Bernie said, come and join one of my community choirs, as you said in your intro. And I was like, as welcoming as she is to her community choirs and accepts everybody, I knew that I don't have the feedback loop to tell me when I'm singing flat. And so I would be spoiling it for everyone else. And the objective of those groups is to try and make good music. And I wanted to be somewhere where nobody cared whether it was beautiful or not.
So you have this conversation and you agree to start this choir, this Tuneless Choir. Was it called the Tuneless Choir in the beginning?
We'd had conversations. Bernie at one point said, I'd said tone deaf, and she said, no, you're not tone deaf. And she's quite right, I'm not entirely tone deaf. We'd almost fallen out over it because I was kind of in denial. I hadn't really researched what tone deaf meant. And then I found this word tuneless, which was probably completely incorrectly defined on this webpage I was looking at, but it said lacking the ability, practice or confidence to sing in tune. So when I went back to Bernie and said, look, I've found this, and that was some kind of mutual ground that we could agree on. I think I always thought I was lacking the ability to sing in tune. And I think to a certain extent, Bernie always thought it was practice and confidence, although now she'll accept that I lack the ability as well. And so we kind of talked about just having this session, but it was great because Bernie was all set up with running her community choir, so she could just say, well, we'll do it at this venue and we'll do it in this way. She completely designed how it might be. And then we were talking and said, well, what shall we call it? And because we'd used this word tuneless, there couldn't be anything better than that.
So what happens? You have a bunch of people in a room. Bernie, you have all this experience with singing with people and getting parts and whatever. And now you're in a room with people where those standards are, I'm assuming, not really relevant. What's that? What happens?
It's a funny thing, really, because I'd only ever worked with teenagers. I'd never worked with adults. So I was actually a little bit nervous about working with adults. That was when I started the first community choir. But I soon realised that there was absolutely no difference at all. And yes, you're right, things are slightly different, but I still do warm-ups just the same as I do with my community choirs. I still pick great songs that everybody loves to sing. I don't really go for ones that people wouldn't recognise or that they're not that keen on. It's remarkably similar. The one thing that is different is that there's far more laughter in the Tuneless Choir than there is in the community choirs.
And of course, we just sing songs right the way through the evening. We don't work on anything. So we don't kind of pause and go back and say that wasn't a C sharp or whatever, if there is even a C sharp. You see, I don't even know enough to know if a C sharp exists. We just sing one song after another for the whole evening. There's no sitting around waiting for the tenors to practice their bit or anything like that.
Yeah, there's no actual learning, but I like to think that there is some really good stuff going on. And even if they're not singing perfectly in tune, it really doesn't matter. As long as they're getting the real pleasure out of it and having a good laugh, then that's fine by me.
You're listening to How Can I Keep From Singing? My name is Stuart Stotts, and my guests today are Nadine Cooper and Bernie Bracha. All right, so the big question is, how does it sound to the person who isn't singing? If I walk into the Tuneless Choir room, am I going to be leaving very quickly under the pretense of having another appointment, or am I going to enjoy it as a listener?
I think if you have perfect pitch, you won't, because the husband of my current choir leader has perfect pitch, and he puts headphones on when he's in the same building as us. But generally, it's not bad, is it?
Yeah, I'd liken it to football, obviously soccer, but it's like a football crowd when they all get together and they're all raising the roof and singing with great joy. That's exactly what it sounds like.
So there's probably a bell curve. One of our choir leaders would describe it as a bell curve, where there are some people who are hitting the right notes. And I mean, I do half the time, apparently. I just don't know which half. And then there's kind of people either side of that, a few who are miles away and a lot who are somewhere in the vicinity.
It reminds me a little bit of the mythical pub singing, where people would just gather together and sing whatever, and increasingly as they drank, perhaps the sound would degenerate. I don't know, but that same sort of feeling.
Yeah, I was thinking just that when Bernie was talking about a football crowd. Yes, yeah, a communal group of people enjoying themselves.
I recently did an interview with someone around the sacred harp tradition of singing, which you may or may not be familiar with, but it's very loud. Another person that I talked with about it said, well, basically it's just shouting together. I don't think that's what your choir is, but I need to ask the question.
No, I wouldn't say shouting. I have trained them fairly well, not necessarily in learning to sing, but in learning when to go quiet and when to go a bit louder. So, it's all right.
It sounds to me like what you're really doing in part is encouraging exuberance.
Yes, very much so. I think that sums it up. That's
a really good observation. Yeah.
What are some of the songs that you found work well for people to sing together?
Well, when we started up, I had like a bit of a formula. I thought, well, there's got to be an Elvis in there. There's got to be a Queen song. There's got to be ABBA. There's got to be Beatles. And we kind of built it on that, really. So they're well-known songs that people are comfortable with. But more recently, we really push ourselves out of our comfort zone. In our second ever rehearsal, we decided to do Bohemian Rhapsody. There was a couple walking past the church, and they just looked at each other and said, I've never heard a church choir sing that one before.
A different kind of worship.
Yes.
How do you deal with the words? Do you have sheets? Do you project them? Because these songs, mostly people will know a chorus, but not necessarily the verses.
Yeah, when we started, we created songbooks, but because we get through so many songs in a session, it was getting unmanageable, really, with all the printing. So we now have the words on either big TV screens or a regular projector screen.
It's always nice, I think, to have that, because then people aren't looking down as they're singing. They're looking forward and more up, which just encourages better singing anyway.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Did you ever kick anybody out of the Tuneless Choir?
No, but we have had a graduate We had one guy who came along, a lovely man, local guy, and he was with us for quite a few weeks, and then he said, do you know, I've been thinking about this and I think I can sing better than I thought I could. So he went off and joined another local community choir, and I still see him now, and we still have a laugh about the fact that he was our first and possibly only graduate.
So you've got this idea and it works and people come. I assume, I don't know, how big at the first choir, what did it size-wise grow to?
We started out with 60 the first session, and then within a few weeks, we were at 120 regularly.
That's huge.
Yeah, we had 134 one time when some TV cameras came along, and everybody decided to pitch up at once. Because some people come regularly and others just drop in, and because we're not learning anything, people can just drop in when they're available. It doesn't matter. Then, of course, like every choir in the pandemic, we've struggled since the pandemic. Is in that numbers have gone down.
What does it say to you that there's so much interest in something like this?
Yeah, it's a bit bonkers, isn't it? Really, I think that's my conclusion. I think that there's just a group of people who really do get a lot from singing and love their music. It's a bit of nostalgia, and I think they do just understand that the value of kind of stepping away from the everyday, because that's what it's about, really. I think it's getting away from the traumas and or busyness of everyday life. And I've seen people going through trauma come and rely on us as a bit of respite. And I've seen people who walk through the door shaking with stress and come along too. And of course, not everybody's in those groups. There's lots of people who just find it as a kind of valuable addition to their week, something that just makes them feel better. And I think there's a bit of a kind of way of the world at the moment that people like to find a source of kind of unrequited joy.
There's also, I think you mentioned earlier, this sense of connection with other people that is common in any kind of choir, that is maybe even greater here because you're just there for fun. Nobody's pretending that you're trying to learn, Requiem or something like that.
Yeah, I think we remove the stress of, I mean, I suppose people who are good singers will probably go along to one of Bernie's community choir sessions and not feel stressed about it. But I would certainly have felt very stressed going into that situation. And I imagine there's people in the middle who kind of go, right, okay, have I rehearsed enough for tonight? Or am I going to struggle with that bit? Or, oh, I've got to really concentrate. And it becomes heading towards work, or it's something another task that needs to be done properly, whereas we don't have any of that. But of course, there's all the other benefits of singing, not just, I mean, the community, but all the kind of the physical and mental health benefits piled in there as well. The endorphin rush, the reduction in cortisol levels.
Right. Those are fairly well documented. And I think people are more and more recognizing that that's one part of the power of singing together. It strikes me, it's a gift to people to say, here's a judgment-free zone where you can come and just sing and not worry. We're going to do this in an ongoing way so you can also make connections. Seems like a great gift to the people in the communities where this happens.
Yeah, and we're hugely grateful to our choir leaders. So those, obviously, we're not running 30 choirs between us. We've got people around the country here who have heard of the idea and decided to take it upon themselves to start a tuneless choir. And we know, that takes a bit of work. It takes a bit of commitment and persistence. You've got to show up. And we just have this fantastic group of people who are willing to do that kind of week in, week out. And some of them have been with us coming up to 10 years now. So that's brilliant.
So you have this idea, and in a sense, without thinking about it economically, you're franchising it, spreading it around. What kind of things do you use to train or let people begin in a place where they're benefiting from what you've learned? What do you offer to, if I call you up and say, I want to start a tuneless choir, do you just say, go ahead, or do you have some things to share with me?
Yeah, the first thing that we do is get them to a tuneless choir. That is... that's got to be the very first thing. So they go in and experience a tuneless choir, and they'll be able to tell within the first 10 minutes whether it's for them or not. fortunately, most of the people that come to us are the people who really do embrace it. After that, Nadine deals with the franchise itself. And once they've received the prospectus, Nadine, that's when they will then ring me and we'll have a conversation. And that's when I'm able to assess, not in a formal way, but just to be able to assess what qualities they have, what experience they have, how good they are with technical. When you're using screens and everything, tech is often the hardest thing. And really just get a really good idea of who they are as a person, because I think it's one of these jobs where we're not acting, but in a way we are, because we've got to create that atmosphere for them. And if we get people who are very shy and love music, very good at music, but can't actually present a tuneless choir, if they don't have that experience and personality, I would say, then it's not going to work. And when we started, we weren't quite as on it as we are now, and a couple slipped through and they really weren't suitable. But the nice thing is we've never had to sack anybody, because they just realise themselves, and like I said, the vast majority have been just so successful.
And I suppose, and my background's business, so I kind of, in the franchising side of things, I help people with whatever they need. So some come to us and they've already run their own choirs themselves or other sorts of business, but other ones come to us and they don't understand about keeping accounts, and obviously there's the whole marketing thing and making sure that we stay true to the tuneless choir, because there will be some people who go, oh, I'll start a tuneless choir and I'll teach them all to sing, and I'm like, that's a band. We don't have many rules. We're very flexible about how people do things in general, but we have to keep to the core principles of tuneless choirs, because that's what makes it work.
And one of the favourite quotes that I've ever heard from a choir leader was, I just love this job because I can be a stand-up comedian for the night.
It certainly takes some leadership qualities. And I assume that someone who's going to be in front of the tuneless choir has to have some musical background, but also be willing to forego their lofty standards that they may have come in with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've had a whole range of people. So Sheena, who runs our virtually tuneless online choir, as well as a couple of choirs in Kent. She was a Zumba teacher. Can't read music, but knows how to stand up in front of people and get them to do things. Lots of personality and presence. And she absolutely loves music. So she will put things on her playlist that I've never heard of. And that passion compensates. She doesn't need to be able to work out how many bars there are before she brings everybody in, because she knows the songs already. She's at that level of knowledge. And then at the other end, we do have, I'm thinking of Angela, who runs Abingdon Tuneless Choir, who is top end professional singer, really, or semi-professional singer. And so she knows everything about music. But when she joined, she would admit that she didn't know really the popular songs that were required to sing. So she and her daughter helped her, I think, to gain an understanding of 60s, 70s, 80s popular music.
So you've got 30 plus choirs around the UK, more coming. Do you have any outside of the United Kingdom, or do you plan to conquer America, or what's your long range goal here?
We've got a couple in Canada now. So Sharon Marnell ran a couple of choirs in Hampshire, in England, and then she met the man of her dreams and ended up going to Canada to marry him. She's been there coming up to a couple of years, and then decided she wanted to start tuneless choirs there. So we thought it was all going to be quite low key, and so she started them up, and then we've got a massive amount of publicity from that. And I'm left now going, oh, what do we do now, really? So I've got quite a few people who've completed the form on our website and have said they're interested in starting tuneless choirs in the States. I had discussions just before the pandemic with our Department of Trade and Industry, because I'd had some inquiries then. And they told me, be very careful about franchising in the US, because it's much more strictly regulated, and you can end up, you've got to lodge certain documents, you've got to have a different contract, which the way we run, it's very much kind of hand to mouth. And so I'm going, I'm not quite sure how I will achieve that. Maybe AI will help me. So I'm kind of putting that to one side while I sort out we've got our 10th birthday celebrations coming up. So I'm putting that to one side, and then I'm going to have a look and see whether there's either a way of doing franchising in the States or a different way that we can operate that. It would be fantastic to be able to do it. It's just the how, really.
I want to thank you both very much for talking with me here today. I love this idea. I just have a big smile when I think about the idea of a tuneless choir and people getting together to sing. So I will have information about your organization in the notes. And again, thank you very much for talking with me here today.
Oh, it's a real pleasure.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. Thank you, Stuart.
You've been listening to How Can I Keep From Singing, a production of Common Arts. My guests today were Nadine Cooper and Bracha of the Tuneless Choir.